Welcome to Fox 55's Fastlane.
Thanks for joining us on your Sunday morning home for the local auto racing scene. I'm Jana Wimmer. Bryon is traveling this week, but we have lots to cover today. Some racing at State Park Speedway, an exciting cup race in Kentucky, and we'll bring in Curt Keene for his Keene Observations. We'll also welcome a young female driver from Wisconsin to the studio. Let's get started with some highlights from last week. It was a special Saturday night of racing at State Park Speedway as both the Mid-American Stock Car Series and Midwest Truck Series paid a visit. Bryon has your highlights across all divisions.
Eric Linkford and Scott Knoll starting in the front row of the Mid-American Stock Car feature, but Wausau native Lyle Nowak quickly makes his move, improving on his 6th position and shifting in front of leader Scott Knoll on lap 23. The first caution comes with 38 laps to go as Mark Bruner goes into the spin cycle in turns 3 and 4. Nowak keeps the lead as Rick Tackman Jr. follows behind. The yellow flag out again with 21 to go as Eric Linkford spins out. Nowak was strong on the night's last caution, opening up a 5-car length lead on Tackman, cruising into victory lane as the winner of the 75-lap feature.
The expectations are always high. You know, you're kind of like the hometown boy that comes back, and obviously we have a lot of laps out here, which helps. But there's some awful good competition, and anytime you can get a win in this series, it's reason to feel good about it, and to come back home, it's real special.
Wausau's own Jeremy Lepak clocking the fast time in the Midwest Truck Series. He's also leading the super late model standings at State Park. Camden Murphy out of Chicago in the 85 quickly gets to the front as well, gaining the top spot 5 laps in. Meanwhile, State Park regular Derek Kraus wants in on the action, moving up to 3rd. Murphy's big lead was wiped out during a caution with 8 laps to go. Murphy staying in front of Lepak as Kraus edges into 2nd before another caution. Murphy and Kraus going side by side before Murphy taking control again and Lepak following into 2nd. A caution with 3 laps left sets up a single file restart as Murphy finishes out his feature win, followed by Lepak and Kraus.
It feels awesome. We've had really bad luck here in the past and come up really short this year in general, and we've had just some really bad luck overall. But C&J Fabrication, they put together a great truck, and we can't thank them enough, that's for sure. But today I knew it was going to be real tough with some of the guys that race here weekly, so, you know, it's a great feeling, that's for sure.
Mondale Peters had the early lead in the Budweiser Fabiano Brothers Limited late model race, holding off Evan Call, who would get passed by Todd Handrick with 16 laps to go. Justin Mondyke following Handrick to the front, moving into 3rd with 15 left. Handrick and Mondyke battling side by side for 5 laps until Call spins, bringing out a caution. Peters and Mondyke racing door to door for 3 laps following the restart. Peters hard to the inside and spins, so he heads to the rear. David Kabelka with a shot at the lead. On the final lap, he gets inside Mondyke and has just enough to cross the finish line first in a dramatic finish. David Lashua took the early lead in the Krieger Insurance Pure Stock 25-lap feature. Just a few laps in, the caution flies as Dylan Mackesy and Nick Erickson end up in the wall. After the cleanup, Lashua held off Brock Heinrich on the restart to hang on to the lead. Another caution flying on lap 10 when Brandon Knobloch in the 71 goes up in smoke. A lot of oil spilling onto the track. During the caution, Travis Bohm pulling into the pits with problems, handing the 2nd spot over to Naraki. 5 laps to go. Schramm jumps to the outside, challenges for the lead, pulling alongside Lashua on the final lap. The two going side by side with Lashua by a nose over Schramm at the line. James Leitz and Michael Heidman battling for the lead to start the Snap-on Mini-Mod feature. Heidman finally clears Leitz after 10 laps. The battle then brewing for the 3rd spot as Justin Mondyke goes to the outside of Alex Bohm. Battling door to door for 5 laps, making contact with 8 laps to go. Up front, Heidman takes a checkered flag, Leitz finishing 2nd. In the Motors Service and Supply mini stock feature presented by Fox 55's Fastlane, it was the Zach Onsen show. Onsen jumping out to the early lead, never looking back, leading from the green to the checkers. Behind him, Greg Blount working his way to the front and into the 2nd position. Dave Meyer jumps to the outside of Kelly Sankey on the final lap to take 3rd. In the professional drywall bandoleros, Colton Goralski claiming the early lead while Luke Fenhouse works his way to the front, finally catching Goralski with 4 laps to go. Fenhouse makes it back-to-back wins at State Park Speedway.
Thanks, Bryon. State Park Speedway was supposed to bounce back again this week with the Wausau Noon Optimist Kids Night presented by Pepsi, but Mother Nature spoiled those plans. Races were rained out Thursday night and rescheduled for this afternoon, so there's still time to get out there and take in some racing action. Fan gates open at 2 p.m. Qualifying is at 3 p.m. and racing is at 4. It is still kids' night, so there are bike races for kids and lots more kids' activities. Now it's time to welcome in Curt Keene with this week's Keene Observations. Curt, how you doing?
Good. You know, it's different without Bryon here, but you're doing a great job.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate that. Always great to have you. State Park Speedway rained out on Thursday night. They're racing this afternoon. What do you expect to see?
Well, you know, it was disappointing, but, you know, Mother Nature was just, you know, one thing that you know, because he's your father-in-law, Ron Wimmer, no one's going to tell him nothing. He's going to try his hardest, and obviously it wasn't going to get in. And, you know, going to go racing this afternoon. It's going to be hot out, but, you know, it's going to be a good day of racing. It's always a good day to be racing. You know, the points are getting tight. The pure stocks are really close. The mini stocks and even the super late models, all our divisions are pretty close. I mean, from first to fifth, the limited late model classes all Justin Mondeck right now, but you know, you never know what could happen, as you saw with the highlights.
It's kind of that halfway point of the season. Have you talked to drivers about, you know, how they're feeling, how they think things are stacking up so far this year? Yeah,
I think there's some nerves. You know, you always want to win a championship, and it showed last week. Mike Heidemann last year, I mean, he came down last year in the Snap-on Mini Mods by 1 point. So, you know, every point matters, and, you know, drivers say they don't think about points, but deep down inside, they want that championship. They know where they're at, and they'll let you know if you miss a point or two, too. So, or maybe miss a spot on scoring, but I just call the races. So.
Yeah, and the super late models came down to the final race of the year last year, too, at State Park Speedway. Last Saturday night at State Park, they had brought in the Mid-American Stock Car Series, also the Midwest Truck Series, and that was some really good racing.
Yeah, it was. You know, the touring series are always fun when they come to State Park because, you know, there'll be guys that know the track. There's people that don't know the track. And it's just kind of interesting to see some of these drivers take lines around the track. And, you know, last week to see, you know, Lyle Nowak win and get a win for his friend Bill that passed away earlier in the week. And just to see Lyle in victory lane, and everyone was happy, and, you know, the tears of happiness. And, you know, Lyle's kind of a guy that everyone looked up to as a kid, as a race fan. Everyone loved the 32 car, and to see everyone celebrate with him. I know his wife, Marcy, she's been a great supporter of his racing, and, you know, Lyle, I was happy for him. And in the truck series, you know, to see Jeremy Lepak get behind a truck, get fast time, battling out with Camden Murphy and 13-year-old Derek Kraus right there. It was anyone's race. I mean, side by side, it was just by a little bit in all those races. It was good racing last week. Some of the best I've seen all season again, and I'm not just saying it because I work at State Park. It was really good racing.
It was. And Camden Murphy, you mentioned Jeremy Lepak in a truck, Derek Kraus in a truck, Justin Mondeck also jumped in a truck, so there was some State Park Speedway regulars, but Camden Murphy held off Jeremy Lepak and Derek Kraus on 2 late race restarts to win that truck race.
Yeah, and you would have thought that you know, Jeremy was going to end up winning the thing, and Derek was right there, you know, but it was, he did a good job. Camden's been at State Park before, but that division that the Woods put together, you know, and Justin Mondeck even jumped in a truck, so we had a lot of those guys, but it's not much money to run one of those trucks, and I think that you're going to see bigger and better things for that series, and they're doing a great job with it.
So lots going on this afternoon at State Park Speedway, but kind of in the back of everyone's mind, I think, is next weekend, which is probably one of the biggest racing weekends, definitely at State Park Speedway, if not kind of in this area with the Larry Deachin's Memorial Weekend. What is it about that weekend that everyone just kind of zeroes in on?
Well, it's the biggest race in our area to pay tribute to the great Larry Deachin's, and, you know, Margot and all the people that come back. You know, we make a 2-day event out of it. I think a couple years ago we started calling it Deachin's Fest. We made a fest at the end of July, but just, you know, there's people that travel from Canada that we met at racetracks that would look forward to, and just hanging out. And I think it's just being together for that one weekend. You hate to see it end every weekend when it's over with, but, you know, from the racing Friday night to the pancake breakfast on Saturday to the beanbag tournament, and then the racing. You know, and years ago, you know, Dick Trickle would come up for it, and it made a big weekend. And you know, sometimes we forget, you know, about, you know, our legends in racing, and to pay tribute to them is just a good weekend. And I know we have a lot of fun.
Yeah, and obviously we can all about Larry Deachins, who probably undoubtedly was one of the greatest, definitely short track racers, possibly of all time, was killed in a racing accident at Wisconsin International Raceway. But, that was so long ago, 35, 36 years ago. And now, you still get these younger drivers that are coming up. And I just hear so many stories, and it seems like no matter who you are, whether you're, Derek Krause's age and you're 13 walking through the pits, or you're a Mark Mackesy who's now distantly related to Larry, everyone's talking about Larry and what not only a great driver he was, but what a great person he was.
And I think with all the stories, and Larry paved the way of doing it right. Making sure you take care of your fans, make sure you have a positive attitude if you had a bad night. Obviously I wasn't around when he was killed in a racing accident. But, from the stories we're talking about Margot, and, Mark's a historian of all the great times, and, talk to Scott and Ron, just the stories, it kind of feels like you lived it. And, I don't think you'll forget Larry Deachins. And, like you said, everyone knows about him. I mean, you say that name, it's a pretty big deal. I mean, he's even got shirts, and, those are, it's just cool to see those at other racetracks when you're like, Larry Deachins is from Wausau. He paved the way and made racing special here just like the other greats.
And speaking exactly of that, the winner of the Slinger Nationals on Tuesday night, which is definitely the biggest race in the Midwest, the winner of that race gets the Larry Deachins Trophy. He won the first ever Slinger Nationals. Now that's been going on for 36 years. You got a chance to go to Slinger, and I got a chance to go to Slinger. That was a heck of a race on Tuesday night down there. Yeah,
it was disappointing that last year's champion wasn't there to repeat it, and we couldn't bring the trophy like we did last year. We brought the first ever trophy. Yeah, the trophy's named after Larry. And it was a good race. I picked Dennis Prunty to win. Dennis has been the guy to get around there. Ty Majeski had a good shot of winning, and then he got into a car, which, that's up for debate. I don't know how you could, but it was a good race. I was hoping my buddy Brad Mueller would have won because I know how much that race means to him and to get that Larry Deachins Cup. But it was a great race, and it was good to see a good crowd at Slinger. And I wish it was about an hour from home because it's such a neat track. It's the world's fastest quarter mile, so it's a cool track, banked like Bristol, and it's cool. And we had Natalie and Natalie Decker and Paige racing, and so there was some locals, and it was a fun show.
Yeah, it's such a neat racetrack. You mentioned that banking and things like that. Travis Sauter was there, Johnny Sauter was there, Ross Kenseth, but you kind of talked a little bit about it with the Dennis Prunty winning, but Ty Majeski, with about 6 laps to go, was coming up on some lap cars, got into a lap car, spun a lap car. There was some debate in the tower for a long time, it seemed like, over what was going to happen.
Yeah, I was like, what's taking so long?
Yeah, finally they sent him to the back of the lead lap cars because he brought out the caution and, was involved in the caution, and here he would be starting on the front row with 6 laps to go. But funny story, 2 years ago, a guy by the name of Matt Kenseth was at Slinger. You guys may have heard of him. He was at Slinger, and pretty much exactly the same thing happened. He got into a lap car, laps winding down. They did not send him to the back. He started on the front row and won the race. Yeah. So what did what do you think of that call, and what was your thought process then and now that you've reflected on it for a couple of days?
Well, I look at it, I was a race fan on Tuesday night, so, knowing Ty, I was kind of hoping Ty would win. But I get how the contact rule was, but I also know that there was a rule that says if a lap car's in the way, and there's some lap cars racing in front of the second place, that they wouldn't be punished for it. So it's one of those things, it's a judgment call. It was a tough one to make, and and that happens at racing. Sometimes we even have it at our track. So you kind of got to go with what the decision you made, and who knows if Ty would have been able to get Dennis on the restart. Just something we'll never know. But I know it was a disappointing. Ty was pretty in shock about it. So I think it was probably the right call with contact, but if it does say something in the rules, but yeah, I just wish it would have been a little different, but it is what it is.
And Dennis Prunty, I mean, he pretty much had the field covered a year ago.
Yeah,
he all of a sudden, his car shut off with about 22 laps to go. Chris Wimmer went on to win the race. He had to sit there and watch that, and then I got a chance to talk to Dennis after the race, and you almost felt bad for the guy, like, oh my gosh, is this going to happen to him again? Because he got the lead on lap 13, led until the final laps, and it was going through your head. I'm sure it was going through his head of, am I going to lead this whole race again and come up short?
Well, and to win the race is $10,000, but a lot of sponsors stepped up to give some bonus money. So every lap he led, I think he made like an extra $5,000. So taking $15,000 home was good. And like you said, after what happened last year, you're kind of glad for the guy to win. You know, he's a guy that knows that racetrack, and he was more disappointed. He borrowed his other car to Ross Kent's that it broke. He was more concerned, felt bad for Ross, but you know, he deserved it, and he gets out of the car like he's a WWE, get the old diamond, and he flexed, and you know, he was happy, and you know, his brothers won it, so again, it was just cool to see.
And he was happy to get that big check. He told me he was going to put it in the back of his car and take it to work, and
like
he felt like
Gilmore.
Happy Gilmore.
Yeah.
That's exactly what he said. Curt, thank you so much for joining us. It's time for our first break. We'll be back with a look at an exciting Cup race at Kentucky. Welcome back to Fox 55's Fastlane. I'm Jana Wimmer. The NASCAR Sprint Cup Series debuted a new rules package last Saturday at Kentucky Speedway, and by most accounts, it was some of the best racing of the year. There was great side-by-side racing pretty much all night long. On lap 143, contact between Ricky Steinhaus Jr. He comes up the track. He gets into Jeb Burton. Burton goes around Tony Stewart up into the wall as well. Then we head to later in the race. Joey Logano and Kyle Busch battle for the lead. Logano got the lead on the final restart, but Busch battles back on the inside. He clears Logano and wins the Quaker State 400.
Really, really good to get out there and to race like that tonight and to run up front and put on a good show, I hope, for the fans that were here in Kentucky Speedway and on TV. But most importantly, I can't say enough about Adam Stevens, my team, everyone that did such a phenomenal job for me and gave me a great race car to go out there and perform like I did, and to just be able to put it all together throughout 400 miles like that was really good. And to come back from a couple late restarts there where everybody was battling so hard and cars were everywhere and not knowing where to go, what to do, to get myself moving in the right direction, and then to finally get up towards the front and get that win, that feels really, really good.
Here's a look at your top 10 from Kentucky. Kyle Busch, of course, your winner. Joey Logano, second. Denny Hamlin comes home third. Carl Edwards. Wisconsin's Matt Kenseth with the top 5. Brad Keselowski, Jeff Gordon, Kevin Harvick, Jimmy Johnson, and Kurt Busch. That is Busch's second win of the year, but remember, he missed races when he underwent surgery following his crash at Daytona earlier in the year. In order to make the chase, he must finish in the top 30 in points along with winning a race, which of course he's done, but he is currently 87 points out of 30th.
Certainly over the last few weeks we've done a decent job at being able to run up front, contend for wins. And obviously that momentum's just kind of starting to build, and we hope to continue that on here this weekend at New Hampshire. So look forward to the Interstate Batteries Camry and making sure we can have another good strong run here.
The Cup drivers are in action again this afternoon at New Hampshire Speedway. The race begins at noon Central Time. It's time for another Fox 55 Fastlane break. We'll be joined by a super late model driver making a name for herself across the country. Welcome back to Fox 55's Fastlane with Jana Wimmer and Curt Keene. This week, we welcome a special guest, a super late model driver who is competing across the country, Natalie Decker. Natalie, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You've been bouncing back and forth between Wisconsin and North Carolina, racing in both places. What has that been like for you?
It's really crazy. I mean, it's hard to keep track of what I'm doing, and a lot of people help me out to make it a lot easier for me. It gets very tiring.
Explain a little bit about the racing you're doing down in North Carolina. You're part of the Rev Racing as part of the NASCAR Driver Diversity Development Program. What was that process like of getting selected into that program?
It's a very long process. You have to try out. First you have to send in an application kind of thing, and then they pick 20 drivers out of how many they get. And then you do workouts and drive a race car and interviews and all this random stuff. And then NASCAR judges you. So then NASCAR picks you to be on the team. So Rev Racing isn't really the one judging, they're just the team.
So Natalie, you've been doing that with Rev Racing. What have you learned from that portion of racing when you come back to Wisconsin to race? Have you taken any new things in racing, or is it all just kind of trial and error?
Well, I mean, that car in North Carolina helps me race my super late back here, and my super late helps me race my late model stock back in North Carolina.
And you've done pretty good. You even won a feature at State Park, so it's been a pretty good year when you've come up to race. And yeah, a busy weekend, of course, already this weekend for you. Have you had a lot of fun so far being back with your team that's kind of started you out in late model racing?
Yeah, I love my team back here, and it's really fun because it's racing with my family here, and back there it's like a professional team, which is also fun, but we still all need to get to know each other.
You had a successful year last year. You won the limited late model championship at State Park Speedway. Now you've moved up to super lates full time. You raced super lates last year, doing super lates all this year along with your late model stock in North Carolina. But you picked up your first super late model win a couple weeks ago at State Park Speedway. What was that like?
It was really exciting because I won a lot there with my limited, but I always wanted to win with my super. And when I did, I was so excited, and Tommy did a great job getting the car good.
For those of us that don't know that much about these cars, we've talked about a late model stock in North Carolina and a super late model, that you're racing when you're back in Wisconsin. What is the difference between the two of them?
Well, driving-wise, the difference is the super late here, it's a lot more easier to drive, I would say. It does what you want when you want if you have it set up right. It's either a hit or a miss for the race. And in North Carolina, you can either have a good setup or a bad setup, but no matter what, you'll be more close with the rest of them if they have a good setup or a bad setup. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And like you said, being familiar, you're running with someone that you've met through the program that you had. So, so you're when you're here in Wisconsin, everyone is the people that help you. So there it makes it a little more different because I think your crew chief here, Tommy, knows what he wants the car. Has he learned with, is it Davin that is your crew chief down there?
Yeah, Davin.
So does he know how you like to drive the car, or are you guys still trying to get on the same page?
Well, it's hard because he knows what I want in a race car, but every weekend we were just at Langley and Hickory is the only two races we do, two tracks, but he is the main guy, and then there's people that do the work on the cars at the racetrack. So those are the people that are getting to know me very well, and seeing what I like, and they pretty much already know. It was the first 3 races, they knew exactly what I like.
What do you do to kind of develop that relationship? I mean, obviously you get the deal with the NASCAR Drive for Diversity. You go into Rev Racing. You've worked with your crew chief Tommy and other people here for years and years, so you have that relationship. How do you get to that point, and how do you develop that relationship with the new team?
Okay, well, bonding at the racetrack and racing is the biggest way to do it, and also going and helping at the race shop and stuff. But outside of that, the long nights after we loaded up the car and then we hang out for a little bit at the hotel, or we go out to dinner or lunch, or, we just hang out and get to know each other as a person.
So it's as much kind of at the racetrack, but also away from the racetrack.
Yeah, yeah.
And not only you do racing, we got a hockey coach here. You play hockey, you love racing, but what do with hockey, has that made you a better race car driver? Tougher mentally?
Tougher, maybe mentally, yeah, I could see that.
Competitive, maybe?
Competitive, yeah. I really am not sure.
We talk about Rev Racing, and you kind of refer to them as being, a professional team. What is that like going down there and having where you have full-time people that are working on your race car that are paid to do that all the time, as opposed to up here where you have great people that work on your car, but it's probably a little bit different atmosphere.
Yeah, it's different because it's set hours, they're there, and I have to be there working out. And then here it's when Tommy gets done with work, we're there, and we're just it's a lot different because it's not as strict maybe. I don't know else how to explain it.
Well, I could see it, a little loose atmosphere,
Yeah.
especially when you're around the shop and around the racetracks, and it's nice to be at home, especially where your fan base is. You have plenty of fans that come to the racetrack. Do you know all your fans' names by now?
Pretty close, I think.
You have a lot of support, and you see it on Thursday nights when you're after the race. A lot of people come down, and that's what racing's about. Is it's family sport. Obviously, your dad funds your team, and your other people that help. But seeing the people, I think that makes it fun for a race car driver, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely seeing my fans and being there and winning for them and racing for them, it makes it a lot more fun.
We talked, Curt brought up a good point of family, and you do kind of have this family racing thing too, where your two cousins, Claire and Paige, also race super late models. All your cars are in one shop, and I know you guys kind of grew up racing together. What was that like?
Very competitive. Like, we've never really got to race against each other growing up, but now we're all at that point where we're at the highest point here in Wisconsin. So we're all racing against each other, and now it's like we even push each other even harder, and sometimes it gets a little crazy.
Do you guys share secrets? Do you talk about
No.
your cars with each other?
No.
It's kind of, hey, I'm competing against you when I'm at the racetrack.
Yeah, we don't share secrets anymore.
It's like brothers, but cousins. And even you girls all tried out for the NASCAR for Diversity, and you guys were pushing each other. I mean, that had to have been exciting to know that you still want to try to beat your cousin, but with them cheering you on, pushing you. I think there was footage. I think your cousin Paige was yelling, telling you, go, you can do it.
Yeah.
That had to be pretty fun.
Out.
Yeah.
Yeah, when it was my first time trying out for that, Paige really helped because she's been through it before. So in that aspect, she really helped Claire and I both. And then every year we go back, it's us three against everyone else. It looks like we're all matching race suits, helmets, everything. So.
And they probably don't know that you guys are that competitive, but
No.
When you win something like that, do you feel kind of bad for the other two that they weren't selected? I mean, it's got to be kind of tough because you want to see everyone succeed, right?
Yeah, it was tough. It was very tough, actually, when we all found out that I made it and Paige or Claire didn't. It was kind of awkward at times.
There's no fighting or nothing?
I think there was a little bit of fighting.
Or say something behind each other's back, right?
That happens sometimes. But you've grown up in Wisconsin pretty much your whole life up in Eagle River. What's it been like? I mean, now you moved down, you're living in an apartment in North Carolina. I know your mom's down there and your brother. But, what's that been like living down there kind of in the racing capital of the world, per se?
It's really fun because all the guys there are now my age that I race with. So I have friends that are 18, 19 years old, and it's not like I'm friends with some 30-year-old guy racing back here, because that's where they all are at. So I'm making a lot of new friends and meeting a lot of new people down there.
We talked about your travel back and forth. I know you're here racing this week. You did Slinger Nationals. On Tuesday, you were there racing State Park Speedway this week, Plover, Golden Sand Speedway. Then you go back down to North Carolina. What do you kind of have on tap for the rest of the year? Are you back and forth a little bit more, or are you down there for good after this?
I'm going to be back and forth until racing season's done in October probably, but I'm going to stay down there for the winter and help out with my team and get the cars ready for the next combine.
How involved are you in that process of at the shop? Going to the shop, working on the cars. How involved are you with that down there?
Pretty involved, I would say, because I go every day. I work out every day, and then I go in the shop, and either if there's nothing to do on my car, I go help the guys in the K9 part. So I try to learn as much as I can in both of them, because obviously next year my goal is to be in a K9 car.
Perfect. Now we have this kind of rapid fire 6 questions that we call our checkered finish. So Curt and I are going to go back and forth and fire them off to you. So the first one is, what was your first car?
My dad never got me a car.
We're going to have to
never
talk to
had
him about that.
Car. A race car, actually.
That'll count.
A race
That
car.
counts.
Okay.
So he never bought you a car. What would your dream car be if he did buy you a street car?
Oh, I never thought about that. Probably a Viper.
Wow.
Did you hear that? I think Chuck's here somewhere. Hopefully he's
Viper?
listening.
Oh.
What was your first job?
Just helping my dad, because I've raced every summer. I never had time to have a job.
So he puts you to work at the snowmobile track,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Oh, good. But you'll be gone this winter.
She's working down there in North Carolina, right? They have you hard at work.
Who is your favorite NASCAR driver, current or former NASCAR driver? You could pick one.
I'd have to say Chase Elliott right now is definitely my favorite driver.
That's a new one. Usually it's Jeff Gordon.
I know. I was going
That's
to
nice.
say, we had like 5 in a row that went with Jeff Gordon. If you could race at any track at any level, what would it be?
Bristol.
There we go. Another
sure.
Bristol.
I think about 75% of the drivers have picked Bristol. What is it about Bristol that is so enticing?
I don't know. I've never even been there to watch a race. So even going there to watch a race would be awesome. But it just sounds like, I don't know. Just
I think the atmosphere is
track,
just awesome.
yeah.
What's the favorite thing you like to do away from the racetrack? When you're not racing, what do you like to do?
I do a lot of things. I play hockey, I dance, I do yoga. I love hanging out with friends. I kind of just like to do everything that I couldn't do growing up because of racing.
What normal kids should
Yeah.
do, right?
Exactly. And I'm sure I know, with your bouncing back and forth, but you have a lot of people that help you out racing, especially up here in the Midwest. Do you have any sponsors you'd like to thank?
Yes, I'd like to thank Auto Select, Auto Gear, Rhinelander GM, Amsoil, Tom Luce Photography, Kim's BSS, Wimmer 3D, Swift Springs, Mississippi Welders, and then back in North Carolina with my Rev Racing team, NASCAR, and Rev Racing and Max Siegel.
Natalie, thank you so much for joining us. We wish you the best of luck as you're traveling back and forth in all your racing. We have a Fastlane t-shirt, a polo shirt, a nice polo shirt to thank you for coming. And we also, of course, have some sponsors of our own that help us on the show. So here's a gift card for Country Fresh Meats.
There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. We'll be right back after a quick break. We're cruising right along on Fox 55 Fastlane. Now let's broaden our horizons and learn a little bit more about what makes these cars tick. This week, I caught up with former NASCAR Sprint Cup driver Scott Wimmer, and we talked a little bit about the bodies that go on those race cars.
Fox 55's Fastlane Tech Tips are brought to you by Car Parts.
Welcome to this week's Tech Tips. I'm joined by former NASCAR Sprint Cup driver Scott Wimmer, and this week we're talking about the body on these race cars. There's a lot that goes into these. They're all separate pieces that you put together. Just explain to me a little bit about what goes into putting these bodies on these race cars.
It's very complex putting these race cars together. Everything is individual pieces. So we have your front fender, you have your door, your rear quarter, your whole bumper cover. All built for aerodynamics. We are very concerned the way the air goes over the car, how it pushes down. Ultimately, it helps you grip better to the racetrack if you have a lot of downforce on these cars. You can change pieces, you can relocate, you can move these things around. Ultimately, you're looking for one goal, and that's to get the max downforce you can.
And one thing that's nice about having the separate pieces, if you're rubbing doors with a guy all night at the track, you could just replace that door instead of having to replace an entire body.
Yeah, it definitely is. If we rip this fender off, I think you can buy one for around 180 bucks. Sometimes you do that, and it's really easy to change out. If you're racing the next night or the next week, it takes you a few hours and you're back on the track.
And if we look down this car, then we have a skirt and we also have a spoiler on the back. What are some of these key pieces that help with the aerodynamics?
It's another real big part of the aero of these race cars. You're trying to get your back to grip to the track as much as you can. So you have a rear spoiler back there. We can play with angles. If you want to take a little bit of rear downforce away from the car, you can. You just lay it back. Ultimately, it's one of the most important parts. All the air comes over the front and hits that rear spoiler. You want to make sure you have it on there and have it on there strong.
And of course, you can tweak things your way a little bit, but there's always rules. So something I have in my hand here is a template, and this is something that you'll see in tech. And so what it does is it goes right over different parts of the race car and makes sure that your pieces are on there correctly. Is this something, everyone it seems like has one of these in their shop, and it's pretty key to how you put this car together.
Yes, it definitely is. And it's standard really around the United States as far as race cars, as late model race cars, is these templates. So, you can drop this a little bit and probably get a little advantage, or drop the fender a little bit back there and get an advantage. The tech inspectors are always putting these on your car, making sure everybody's staying within the rules and not getting too far outside of it.
That's a closer look at these bodies in this week's Tech Tips. That's going to do it for this week's edition of Fox 55's Fastlane. As always, our thanks to Scott Wimmer and Curt Keene, as well as our driver guest, Natalie Decker. And a big shout out to our sponsors, Brickners of Wausau, Flipside Graphics, Country Fresh Meats, and Car Parts. Have a great Sunday afternoon.